Yesterday's price is not today's price.
Welcome in the Dynasty Market Watch, where yesterday's price is not today's price. We're doing a 4-round startup mock draft. There's really not much intro here, guys. Let's just get right to it. Everybody's going to have, 4 teams. Brian's going to go first, then Matt, then myself. And so we're going Superflex tight end premium. There's going to be no 2025 rookies in this. So, Brian, lead us off, 101.
101, I don't think it's changed. I'm rolling with our boy Josh Allen here. I think it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, agreed. And to me, I have him in the same tier as Josh Allen, but I'm going to go ahead and just take Lamar Jackson second. Those were easily my top 2 guys.
All right, so that brings me up at the 103. Give me my 101. Well, probably tied with Josh Allen. Give me my 101, Justin Jefferson.
So it was not Patrick Mahomes, to be clear.
It's not Patrick Mahomes, but I will say I just did an auction update for my auction values, which basically serve as a trade chart or a dynasty ranking. And I did just move Patrick Mahomes up quite a bit. So we'll get them eventually. But he's still not in the realm of the top 3.
But he's like a top 20 quarterback for you now.
Top 20 quarterback? Yeah, he's a top 20 quarterback. We will see him get drafted at some point today.
He's easily top 2 in the AFC West for fantasy purposes, for sure. But who's top 1? It might be Bo Nix, but we'll get to that maybe. Okay, so 104, this is a new team. I'm going to go with a wide receiver here, and that is the wide receiver 1 of this year, Jamar Chase.
Makes sense, yeah.
Quick comment. So I think it's interesting because I think to me right now, these 4 guys are a tier of players. And then maybe there's another guy that maybe has a case to be in the tier as well. But the point being is that when we think about these tiers, we get really ingrained in the tiers in the offseason. And then 1 week later into the season, they get changed. And I was looking at my tiers and I was thinking 1 or 2 weeks ago, it was a totally different landscape of tiers of players. And so I think it's a reminder for myself is that as we get into the offseason, we're going to start tiering these guys. There's a top 7, then there's a clear top 18. Try not to get too ingrained on those tiers because they are going to change literally 1 week of data when they're going to change.
And I think we'll probably draft this next person soon, but just that comment on the Bengals and Jamar Chase, their value is always feels like the last 3 or 4 years have been low explosion, and now they're back up to where they were before, or maybe even higher. So that's kind of the Jamar Chase point that I want to make is I think a lot of us, including myself, are what the heck is going on? But it happens every year, it seems. I don't know what the hell Cincinnati does in the offseason, but he's back to where he should be. So, yeah.
Yeah, and until he does it, like he's done, I think, a couple times this year, you really do forget about Jamar Chase just being the only player, including Justin Jefferson, that can give you multiple 50-point games in a year. It's just a specialty of his that I had those top 4 as well. There is one player that I almost put above Chase at 104 that I'm going to take here at 105 that I do think firmly belongs in this tier. So with the 5th overall pick, I will take Brock Bowers. I would rather have him than Daniels and Neighbors.
Okay.
I think there's a strong argument to be made that Bowers is the single most valuable player you can have in fantasy football.
I like it. I was prepared to take him around 8 or 9, thinking I was going to be some hot shot drafter here. Obviously, I'm not. Maybe I'm the cold on it. So I love it. I mean, Brock Bowers is 22-year-old Travis Kelce potentially.
What was peak Pitts and Laporta back end first, early second, those that
I don't
kind
think
of
Laporta ever really got above a mid
second. Yeah.
Pitts was
late going
first,
in the 1.9, 1.10 range. At one
yeah,
point.
I'm just trying to put the grand scheme overall perspective of how great Bowers has been. I'm not knocking the pick whatsoever. I think it's interesting that it as much hype as there was with Kyle Pitts, this is 5-6 picks ahead of him. Maybe.
Yeah, I
maybe
think
more.
his
It's interesting.
I think his rookie year is more impressive than Pitt's. I think it seems more sustainable, and like from a mock startup or from a startup draft point of view, I just think it's gonna make the rest of my draft a lot easier. Like, all right, I just don't have to worry about tight end. Like, I'll pick up like Goddard or some shit. Cole Kmet is a tight end too, way down the line. But it to me, if you either have Bowers and a distant second is McBride to me as the clear tight end too. You either have Bowers or McBride or you don't. That's how I'm viewing the tight end position right now.
And it might not show its head in this exercise, but I think your point is very valid. Like, it's not going to show up top 4, but when you get to like round 6, 7, 8, I think that's when it really is going to be like, whoa, Matt had an advantageous run there. Like, he got a wide receiver 1 at tight end. You know, I mean, if this guy ever gets a quarterback, look out.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, so I'm gonna go here with Team 6. I'm gonna take Jaden Daniels. I think he has a case to be made, kind of in that upper tier of what we were talking about, but still think that he can be a stud.
Yeah. He was right around that area for me too. It really has just been in the last week or two that I've moved Bowers ahead of Daniels, and Daniels' recent downturn in production, I think, can very easily be explained by his rib injury. So I don't think it's any concern long term.
Yeah.
It's
just on Bowers. I don't want to beat the dead horse on Bowers too much, but what in terms of draft capital, what do you value him as? Matt, since you've been thinking about Bowers maybe a little more, I'll let you go first, and then Brian, while Brian is deciding on Team 7's pick.
Like, he's really in the category of Chase and Jefferson for me, where it's like 3 firsts to start the conversation.
3 mid firsts. Like, we're not
right. Like 3 firsts in a player, and generally speaking, I'm really just not even going to trade them unless I'm getting another top 20, top 24 asset back plus some. I wouldn't just trade them for 3 mid firsts. I think 4 maybe, but like I'd want another high end asset to go along with some first.
You need someone to break themselves to want him that bad.
Yeah, agreed. At this point, yeah. All right, Brian. So it's back to you with your 3rd pick for Team 7.
See, this is where I think at this point there's a crossroads of or not a crossroads, like an exit sign, like a highway exit sign, like go one way or the other, right? So like, do you want to build out do you want to go heavy QB? Do you want to go, I'm going to double up receivers? I think this is where you start thinking about that. I think the first 6 that are the right, or around the right 6 anyways, in some order. And that being said, I'm buying time. I'm going to go, I'm going CeeDee Lamb. I think Dak will bounce back. I think I'm looking long-term here. I think he's a stud. He's going to get targets for the rest of his career. The other person I was considering, I assume, is who will get picked next. But CeeDee Lamb is someone I want to get in the bank. Yep.
Yeah. So
and I'll take Neighbors there. I pretty much agree with your thoughts. That's why I quickly filled in the pick of Neighbors, because I think Lamb and Neighbors are really about the same in terms of where I rank them. I think a lot of people would have them right around here. But again, man, just goes to show you how fucking great this 24 class was. We got 3 rookies in the top 8, and maybe
none of them are the 101 or the 102.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's a good point too, man.
Yeah. So this next team, Team 9, I'm going to go with. Well, there's a few receivers in this range that you could decide between, but I said it on yesterday's pod, so I'll go ahead and shamelessly plug that one. So Matt and I went through some contender buys. So check that one out. We talked about some game theory as well. And Nico Collins came up as part of the discussion. I said he has a real case for wide receiver 3. I maybe still have Malik Neighbors wide receiver 3. In fact, I probably do, but I think that Nico is right there. And being attached to CJ Stroud is just, you really can't ask for much more than that.
Where's he ranked in Sleeper's ADP currently?
Can we find him?
Way too low.
40 something.
46 overall. That's just insane. 2 spots below Michael Pittman. 2 spots below Michael Pittman, because that makes sense.
Maybe update that instead of all the stupid fucking emojis you give us all the time, Sleeper.
Yeah, the corn cob laughing emoji is probably less important than good ADP, I would say.
That's real old. Okay. So just quick recap before I pick for Team 10. We each have picked 3 guys: Josh
Yep.
Allen, Lamar Jackson, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Brock Bowers, Jaden Daniels, CeeDee Lamb, Malik Neighbors, and then rounding out at 109, Nico Collins. Okay, so 110. I think this is another. Those were the 3 receivers that I was kind of like talking about. I think this is the next inflection point. I think you can still have a couple of receivers. Maybe that's where the running backs start getting introduced. To me, I want to do ARSB, but I'm going to. I think Joe Burrow is probably the pick here for a lot of people, and I'm going to go Joe Burrow.
Yeah, that's fair.
So I do find it interesting. So we're through 10 guys, I think, in the last 3 or 4 years in a dynasty startup, especially obviously in a super flex, through 10 players, you probably have like 8 quarterbacks. We've got 4 quarterbacks: Allen, Lamar, Daniels, and Burrow. So pretty interesting, the shift in positional value as we're seeing receivers. We got 5 so far, and then a tight end. So team 11, Matt.
You guys know it's about this time, right? I
love to love you, baby.
Jordan Love makes an appearance.
I think we're going to go with Jordan Love. I still view him similar to Burrow. It's tough. It's tough with Hurts, man. I think Hurts kind of deserves to go in this range. Like a lot of people, I just don't fucking believe in him long term. Like I expect the wheels to go. Like me and Todd were joking on our previous episode that we went through the contender buys on Fantasy Calc, and every contender buy is like an old guy, right? Like Tyreek Hill, Cooper Kupp, Travis Kelce, Derrick Henry, and then Jalen Hurts is on there where he has a lot more contender value redraft value than dynasty value. So it just speaks to like there's a large segment of the people that do not believe in Hurts long term. And
for that large segment, I think it's really difficult to grasp buying for past production, and he feels like his best case scenario is like if he's a freak show like Derrick Henry. It's tough classing a running back with and a quarterback together, but like that's what he feels like to me. That it's like he might be the outlier that just has a long career of like weird, awesome production, or he's a guy that is going to go from first round startup pick to non-existent in a relatively short amount of time.
Yeah, I mean, the way I view it, he just has a perfect setup right now. And, as long as he has a perfect setup of A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, a top 3 offensive line in the league, then, yeah, I'm sure he's going to be really good. But you start losing a couple of those pieces, and I don't know if his production would
also that other guy that you didn't mention maybe takes some of his value away in his peak value anyways. I don't know if he's like Voldemort Part 2 or something like that, which is a Harry Potter reference for anyone that doesn't know Harry Potter. To me, like I was hoping for my couple Hurts bags, like, hey, they'll work for each other and like kind of improve each other. And I don't really see that happening similar to like, again, Henry and Lamar. Like it feels like Henry is Lamar's like, it's accentuating his already skill set that he had. Maybe that's just like highlighting that Hurts maybe didn't have that same type of skill set.
Yeah, and I think he's just kind of not as good and therefore less consistent than Lamar. All right, Todd, you got back-to-back picks here with
team 12 here.
Mahomes, Stroud.
We'll give a transparent view of what Team 12 is thinking right now. So there's basically 2 quarterbacks that Team 12 is looking at, and it's Hurts and Mahomes. There's also 2 receivers that Team 12 is looking at, and that's Puka and ARSB. So the question Team 12 has is, do I want to go QB receiver or receiver? we're not going QB. I just don't think that's a sustainable draft way to go in today's market environment. I also think that if you take Patrick Mahomes, while he has been QB5 since week 8, pretty small sample we're talking there, I don't think that taking Patrick Mahomes in the first round really sets you up to be a likely contender year 1. So I think that you're kind of just drafting the sustainable insulated value with Patrick Mahomes. So I'm going to go ahead and eliminate him from this category. And we're just going to go, this team's going to have some fun. We're going to go ARSB and Puka back to back. And I think that when you do that, not only are you able to compete very early, but you're also very young. And the quarterback environment, I think that there's going to be some options later. I don't think that Mahomes is setting you apart. Hurts, I'm a little higher on him than you all are, but I just like the idea of having those 2 receivers to really set my team apart from a points per game standpoint early on.
Yeah. I was hoping you took one of the quarterbacks there. Because now that I'm looking at my second pick, got Jordan Love with my first pick. After just talking a bunch of shit about why I don't believe in him, I will go ahead and take Jalen Hurts with my second pick.
and I think really quick, so I think there's a clear, I would call it a clear top 7 receivers. And I just got done talking about how these tiers are going to change. But I think there's a clear top 7 receivers that are, while young, also kind of dominant. And then there's another 5 that I think are awesome that I'd love to have on my team. But it's guys like Marvin Harrison Jr., Brian Thomas Jr., Garrett Wilson's been pretty good recently, but it's guys that I'm not as like when I throw Puka out there, when I throw ARSB, Nico, like I just think I'm getting a wide receiver 1 week. Like I don't even think of I think wide receiver 1, if they score a touchdown, could be the wide receiver 1 overall that week. Like I just think it's going to be a boom type week. And when I have like Brian Thomas, like I know that he's awesome. Like I know Marvin Harrison's awesome. Like the usages just aren't great yet. So
yeah, you're just not with those guys. You're not going to be surprised to see 5 points at the end of the day in your box.
Yeah.
All right, Brian. So you got your second pick with Team 10. You got Joe Burrow in the first round with this team.
Yeah. When I drafted Burrow, I figured ARSB and Puka would be gone in some fashion. So my thought process was I was kind of going to highlight again the double QB situation and how it kind of maybe doesn't look as great as it used to feel. I've never been a super. I convinced myself for about a half a season that QB was a good idea, and those are the teams I hate the most of my portfolio. So,
while you're thinking about who you're about to pick, Matt and I on the contenders buys, we talked a little bit of some dynasty strategy, and we talked about flexibility and how having flexibility to trade within your league is huge because I mean that's when you have opportunities to make a deal with someone because they have a need, you can fill that need. It's very difficult if you're sitting there with a Jordan Love, Jalen Hurts type team where you don't have as much flexibility to make a move. Those guys are just so much more difficult to trade than like a top end wide receiver. Like at one point this season, I traded when Nico went down, I traded Lamb for Nico and a 2, or Nico for Lamb and a 2, or vice versa. But I think those guys are just easier to make moves with than these really high end quarterbacks.
Yeah. So if Matt hadn't taken Hurts, I would have taken a QB. I'm going to go Garrett Wilson. I agree with what Todd said that I think there's a 7 and he's for me 8. I think he is someone that can definitely make that step to the point of like when he has those 4 and 5 point games, it would be shocking. Right now, that's not the case. It's because of the shitbag that he has at quarterback. It's because of the Jets being a disaster, whatever else. but I'm banking on the talent and what he's shown. And Garrett Wilson, to me, is a stud that will find a way.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think all these picks are justified and pretty good picks. I don't think Mahomes necessarily deserves to go before now. It is very weird though, seeing a startup draft where Mahomes is still on the board at 204.
It was Mahomes and Wilson for me. That was the decision to make, basically.
Yeah, and that your explanation I think makes sense. I mean the two quarterback start in Dynasty, the trend has definitely shifted away from that market wise. Where like a year ago that was like the popular start to start a draft.
So this team 9 has Nico. This team is now going to be deciding between Patrick Mahomes and you've got a 25-year-old receiver, so still pretty young. But he's probably like a top 5 receiver is what you're looking for. Neighbors, who I think Matt took, like he's still extremely young. I could see that team being like a 1-year punt, and I wouldn't have any issue with it. With Nico, I don't feel as great about like purposely going in on a 1-year punt. So I think what this team is going to do, and like I said, when you take Mahomes, I don't feel like you are setting yourself up in the first 2 rounds to be a bona fide stud team right off the bat. So this team is going to go Bijan after taking Nico, and this team is ready to rock.
So you mentioned you have Nico Collins. That's your first pick. Did you at any point consider stacking with Stroud?
No, Stroud's not even on my radar in the second round. I
guess my point is
know if he's on my radar in the third. Yeah, he's on my radar in the third round.
We talked about quarterback being a stacking situation where you go double tap quarterbacks, right?
Yeah.
I think people are maybe realizing that it doesn't like add that much value always to just go, I need to stack this guy just because, like, and take him over these 2 or 3 or 4 guys that I maybe have ranked above him. Like you mentioned, Bijan, Mahomes for sure, amongst probably, it sounds like probably a handful of people, but I think a lot of people there would have been tempted to go stack.
If we got into the third round and that team was sitting there and it was like, I don't even know if these guys are going to make it there, but we'll just use the third round for an example. And it was Stroud and Caleb were both sitting there. I personally have them valued the exact same. Sure, I would take Stroud over Caleb just to have the nice little stack there, and then I might have some spike weeks. But it never came into play here. I just think Stroud is so far away from being the right value pick at this point.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I'm guessing you're probably not going to agree with the value of this pick. I'm just going to stop the slide right here and take Patrick Mahomes.
No, I mean, that's who I was talking about taking with the last pick. I mean, I thought that Patrick Mahomes was defendable with Team 9.
Yeah, and it usually in the first 20 picks you're not drafting for floor, but the floor is just amazing with Mahomes. Like, all right, the next 8+ years or whatever, I just get a QB1. Like I'm pretty confident in that. Even his down seasons are pretty good for fantasy. They're not like awful. And I do expect him to have another like 2, 3, 4 season run of a top 5 QB play, whether that starts next year or 2, 3 years from now. Knowing me, I'm going to trade him long before that happens anyway. But just seems like very safe value to pair with Neighbors here.
Yeah, and to be clear, like he has been great the last 4 or 5 weeks. I am not nearly as confident as you are about him like getting back up and having multiple seasons of top 5 performance. This year, after these last few weeks, he's bumped back up to QB 13. So that's good. I just don't see him as being like a difference maker, but his value is just so incredibly insulated. Like you just know that you're going to have like a top 2 or 3 round player for at least another, like feels like a decade probably.
I mean, yeah, the only career that you can even compare him to is Brady.
Yeah.
And I just feel like right now he's in that early 2000s run Brady had where he has a dominant defense every year and they don't ask too much of him. And, dominant defenses have like a nice few year run and then they fall off.
Mm-hmm.
I expect that to happen with the Chiefs here in the next year or two. Once that happens, I think they're going to start asking a lot more of him.
They've been asking more of him the last few weeks. He's been pretty freaking awesome. QB5 since week 8.
Mm-hmm. All right, so
Team 7.
Yep, back to you, Brian.
I have CeeDee Lamb so far. To me, I'm debating between 3 players. I have a strong suspicion who I'm going to take. I'm not going to take a quarterback here, and I think this is if I were Team 7 and this was the only team I was drafting, I would think I could get one of the other guys that I want in that next, another guy that I really like in round 3 here. So at quarterback probably. So I'm going to take Jahmyr Gibbs here. He's double-digit touchdowns. He looks as explosive as ever. Especially if Montgomery ever goes down, or it looks like, that's just wheels up. That offense is going nowhere. They want to run the score up on people. Speaking of like Patriots, like that was what was one of the coolest things about like having Patriots fantasy players for those however many years with Brady when he was really slinging it, was like they were perfectly content with scoring 50 points on someone and like not chilling. Like I think that's the biggest knock we've had with the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes is like they just kind of like coast and like we'll win 17-14 and our defense is good, and like that's not what we want as fantasy managers. So Jahmyr Gibbs to me is a home run here paired with CeeDee Lamb.
Yeah, no arguments there. Everything you just said is correct. And as much as I don't like taking these high value young running backs, when you can get them in the middle of the second round, I think that's pretty good value.
Yeah, so that team with CeeDee Lamb and Jahmyr Gibbs. Let me run through what these teams have. So 12 has ARSB and Puka. 11 has Jordan Love and Hurts. 10, Burrow Wilson. 9, Nico and Bijan. Team 8, Neighbors and Mahomes. And 7 has Lamb and Gibbs. So here comes Team 6 with Jaden Daniels. And with what's on the board here, it leads me back to I really don't want to take a QB in the first round because what's available right now, my best availables are Kyler, Drake May, Justin Herbert, and then you've got Achane and Brees, and then a few of those other receivers. You've got A.J. Brown, Drake London, Marvin Harrison Jr., Brian Thomas Jr. So what do you do here? Do you double tap quarterback? Kyler's my clear best player on the board. Or do you kind of just let a quarterback fall? Because there's going to be more quarterbacks that come up later. You're going to have Dak later. You're going to have J.J. McCarthy later. You're going to have Purdy, Trevor Lawrence, Bo Nix that are probably going to be there in that third round. So it's frustrating. This team's going to do similar to what Team 11's doing, and we're going to go double quarterback. And we're going to go – so it's going to be Jaden and Kyler Murray. And so at least we'll have 2 of these teams to look at and see how they shape up with the double quarterback.
Yeah, let me check my list here because I got Team 5 with Brock Bowers, and yeah, I don't love this pick here just because like I think you were just kind of alluding to this too with your Kyler pick. Like there are times in a startup draft where it's like, God, I wish I could trade back like 5 picks right now.
Yeah,
and I think we're like almost at that point of the draft where like. The pick I'm going to take, it's like, oh, man, I could get Herbert or May or someone like that, like 5 picks later or 3 to 5 picks later. But I'm going to pair Bowers with Caleb Williams here. I think that Caleb and May I go back and forth on, and I think the public at large is going to continue flip-flopping on who they prefer between Caleb and May a lot over the next several years. I think they're just both going to be awesome, perennial top 20, maybe top 10 startup picks. And
Who would
I
you
just
rather
like
have between them and Kyler? Like if Kyler were on the board, would you have taken him?
No, I have Kyler like in the same tier. I have Kyler, Herbert, Caleb, and May all in the same tier,
Okay.
and I just like it's almost like like I think we all agree we don't really care that much about age for quarterbacks until they start getting to like the Matthew Stafford age range. But at the same time, like I really have these guys about that even. I'll just kind of defer to or do a tiebreaker with the youth, and again the upside. I think Caleb's going to have some just fucking enormous fantasy seasons ahead of him, where he throws for literally 4,800, 5,000 yards, 40 touchdowns. When he's clicking, it seems like he throws for 330 yards without almost breaking a sweat. Like it is, and then when he's fucking up, he just fucks up all game long.
Well, at least he doesn't have Shane Waldron now. So
yeah. I think eventually they're going to course correct. They're going to get a new coach in the offseason. Maybe it's this Thomas Brown guy who their offenses look good 2 weeks in a row under the new offensive coordinator. But either way, I just think there's no doubt that Caleb's going to be a future fantasy star. So happy to pair him and Bowers. And maybe if the first year doesn't go right, I can flip to like a 1-year punt. Either way, I think it's 2 cornerstones locked down at key positions there. All right, so back to Brian, who got Jamar Chase with his first-round pick for Team 4 here.
So with this team, I'm thinking I'm going to get a quarterback that I like in round 3. I want this to be a contender. I'm taking, and this is probably not what you guys would take here, I don't think, but I'm taking AJ Brown here. I want to pair AJ Brown with Jamar Chase and just go drop the hammer.
I thought you were going to take your boy Breece Hall.
Yeah, maybe in the 4th.
Maybe if he's there in the 4th or 5th, scoop him up. Yeah, no, I don't disagree with that. I mean, there might have been one of like I would rather have Stroud in a vacuum than AJ Brown. If I'm going to win now, AJ Brown makes sense, and then like you said, pick up a quarterback that you like in the next round. I think that makes.
I'm just thinking like you can get like, I mean, obviously like Baker and Geno Smith, and you can be a legit contender if you have those 2 as your quarterbacks, right? Like those are like something like with this build that you can piece together like an Aaron Jones, somebody else running back, and we're cooking.
Yeah, it is like Todd mentioned about the double QB starts. It's going to be a little interesting to see the Chase AJB and Amon-Ra Puka teams, how they finish off the top 4 rounds here.
So I think at this point in the draft, you can start looking at the draft board. So we're going to do a 3rd round reversal. So this team 3 that has Justin Jefferson won't pick again for what, 15 picks? No, 15. You got, you're right. Sorry. 12 picks. Yeah. Won't pick another 12 picks. And so I think you can start kind of looking at, okay, there's 2 teams with quarterbacks. They're pretty clearly going position. There's a few teams that don't have a quarterback. So you could kind of start knocking off that there probably is going to be 3 or 4 quarterbacks to go here in the next little bit. So I think this is probably a good time for a Drake May or Justin Herbert. I'm going to go Drake May here. If I was talking about just this season, he and Drake May are dead even to me. Justin Herbert and Drake May, that is. But I think that there's going to be some hype in the offseason with them adding, maybe they add an O-lineman in free agency. Maybe they draft a receiver. And I think the upside is going to continue to blossom for him. And with that said, I think similar can be said about Herbert. And I'm very notable high on Herbert. I've got probably too many Herbert shares, but I'm also a big Drake May fan. So we'll go Drake May here with Team 3 to pair with Justin Jefferson.
This is interesting because now we're moving back to Team 2. I took Lamar Jackson 2nd overall in the 1st round. I believe this past offseason, CJ Stroud was consensus third overall, which none of us ever agreed with. But he definitely was like top 4 for sure.
Yeah, he was.
It was
ADP
him and Hurts
103.
pretty much. Yeah, it was him and Hurts.
And I'm still not going to pick him here.
He's not even on my radar at this point.
He's definitely on my radar.
The rest of the top tier running backs and then those top 12 wide receivers, I have all ahead of him.
I have him fifth. I have him fifth on my board, I think, right now. Just because, and it's not even like I'm not even like I'm not out on CJ Stroud like Todd seems to be. I think his perception is going to bounce back probably, assuming Nico stays healthy the rest of the season. I think he's going to kind of win some fans back, but right now he's down kind of bad.
Out at cost for me.
The non-rushing really hurts him. Like we've even seen over the past month how the Chargers are starting to let Herbert run a little bit.
Yeah, but
I might be more out on because Caleb, though, at this price. Like
we knew CJ Stroud what he wasn't, and that's a rushing Konami anything rushing wise. We knew that. So like,
yeah,
why were people so enamored by him in the offseason? He had to have not a flawless, but pretty close to flawless rookie season. And that was even before we were projecting Nico Collins as like an absolute game-changing stud, right? Like that's what's kind of crazy to me was that ranking was just like new shiny toy personified.
So there was a lot of that, but also, okay, you're going to be a pocket QB. You're looking at a lot of people were saying like best case scenario, you're getting like the Gen Z Peyton Manning, where he's just going to have several outrageous pocket passing. And then you give him Nico, Dell, and Diggs. And I think people were just like, fuck yeah, wheels up, man. He's going to like, there were respected fantasy analysts predicting 50 touchdown passes for Stroud, which was fucking nuts to me. It completely ignored the current NFL environment. I think that 50 is a high bar when Dak led the league with like 33 last year. But I could somewhat see it, or I could at least justify him being in the middle of the first round going into the year. But then, yeah, Dell's off to a slow start. Diggs tears his ACL. Nico's out half the year. Turns out their offensive line's pretty bad. That PFF Bobby offensive coordinator, a lot of people are out on him. So they're just having a rough year. I'm not going to take him. He would be one of my top 2 picks here, but I'm just going to take Justin Herbert here to pair with Lamar. I've just been really impressed with, like, Todd's always been higher than me on Justin Herbert. And maybe I was just too low on Herbert before. I was definitely concerned about the passing volume going into this year. I did kind of buy into that Harbaugh, Greg Roman narrative. Yeah. But Herbert's just looked fucking awesome, I think.
He's good.
And I think they're going to continue to, give him a few more weapons. This is like the first year of a new regime, new offense, all that. I think we could definitely see a scenario where next year he's just fucking clicking on all cylinders and he's like a top 5 quarterback. So
I also like the fact that he's running a little bit too.
Yeah. They're unlocking that a little bit, it seems.
He was a victim of like similar to CJ Stroud. Like he was like probably overhyped. He had a great start to his career, and then everyone was just like, I'm crowning this guy. He is the new thing. And now I think, and then he crashed. And I think it's coming back to like, oh yeah, he is really good. He might not be a superstar fantasy player, but like if you can get in the back end second round, I absolutely love Justin Herbert. I was hoping I would be able to get my quarterback duo with Allen and Herbert. I would have been ecstatic about that. But I love that pick. I'm going to go. I'm between 3 receivers here. I think I view them similarly. I'm gonna take Marvin Harrison Jr. here. I'm not giving up on the guy. I think he still has crazy upside. I think he could easily be like a back end first round pick range this time next year. and that's what I'm gambling on. And I think I'm gambling with Josh Allen, who really like raises floors and obviously brings ceilings up so that I can take this chance here in the second round with Harrison, that he can really pay off big dividends here.
Yeah, I agree with that. I've always kind of been a little skeptical of Harrison this entire, like, ever since he was a rookie. I'm like, everybody tells me he's a great prospect. He seems really good. I'm not really denying that. To me, when I watched him at Ohio State, he didn't necessarily seem like special, but he just seemed like really good, like Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave. Well, he was looked better than Olave, but like Garrett Wilson, I thought was just as good of a prospect. And I don't love his usage. I don't love his usage so far with the Cardinals as a pro, but also there has been a lot written from some smart people about how teams are already respecting Marvin Harrison at like a Chase Jefferson level and have been since week one. So if you take into that context, I do agree with you that he does seem like he has some really big days ahead.
Allen's the guy to take the swing with the pair, and I think it's an interesting point, and I think a lot of people have probably thought it at this point now in the season, like if his name was Joe Smith Jr., would he be carrying the amount of hype or praise that he still is getting in some camps? Maybe not. I don't know. That's the question that everyone has to ask themselves. I think it's a good swing at this point. I wouldn't want him early second for sure. I would be very uncomfortable mid-second. This is the earliest. Like I said, I wanted Herbert. This was my backup plan.
Shout out Joe Smith, former first overall pick in the NBA draft.
Thank you for catching it. That's why I said Joe Smith. It wasn't just a random.
The 80s maybe. So
shout out to T Wolves.
Yeah. So Team 12 is a third round reversal. So we're going back to Team 12 who double tapped ARSB and Puka. And this team was kind of hoping that Drake May or Herbert might make it to them, and that didn't work out. So this team is now full on fade quarterback, 0 QB. They've got ARSB and Puka, and it's now Devon Achane time, and they are going to win the league this year. That's the plan.
I love the Achane pick, man. I had him a little bit later, like mid to late third, but that's just because I have a pathological hate for good young running backs. But
I have him and Gibbs pretty much even. I'd prefer Gibbs, but he and Gibbs to me are pretty interchangeable.
Yeah,
and I think them like a little mini tier behind Bijan, though.
Yeah, I think that's fair. So you can't argue with the value. As long as 2 is healthy, Achane's going to fucking smash.
So now we move on to Team 11 that has Jordan Love, Jalen Hurts.
And I'm in a little bit of a conundrum here. Stroud is definitely the highest on my board.
Let's kind of, while you're in the conundrum, let's kind of run through at best available here. So, and this will be kind of based on my own list. So I've got Breece Hall, Drake London, Brian Thomas Jr., CJ Stroud, Saquon Barkley, Trey McBride. And then from there, I've got a pretty sizable tier break after that group. So that was, just to reiterate it one more time, that's Breece Hall, Drake London, Brian Thomas Jr., CJ Stroud, Barkley, and Trey McBride is kind of like what I'm viewing as the best available. Brian, am I missing anybody that you're viewing as?
Repeat those names real quick. Sorry.
Yeah. So it's Breece Hall, Drake London, Brian Thomas Jr., CJ Stroud, Saquon Barkley, and Trey McBride as best available. And then I have a pretty sizable tier gap after that group.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the group that you want to. I think those are the next 5-6 picks.
I think you're missing one name, and we talked about him before.
Yeah, and he is my next player on the board, and it kind of depends on like, are we competing? And that player is Rashee Rice. I'm assuming that.
Yeah, Rashee Rice.
Yeah. So the question then being, are we playing out this season, or is it only for next year? And if it's only for next year, then yes. Rashee Rice would be in that group. If we're doing like a rest of season league, then I think that Rashee Rice still has to be knocked down because like you're auto tanking if you take him at this point.
So that's a good point, and we didn't clarify it. The way I have been viewing this exercise is this year does
Next
not
year.
count. It starts.
Yeah.
in
Yeah, that's fine. That's good.
2025.
That's fine. Then yes, Rashee Rice I would include in that group.
And so again, I am torn here. Stroud is the highest on my board, but I don't love doing this. But I also don't love putting a lot of resources into a QB3 this early, and then it kind of forces me to trade one of Love, Hurts, or Stroud. So I'm gonna
QB
pass.
is so difficult to trade anymore. It's just so difficult to make that trade. Like we talked about flexibility. Like, yeah, you can get that third QB, but who are you going to trade him to?
Yeah, right. Like you basically have to, not only do you have to make a trade, but you also have to wait for them to get on a hot streak. Because like right now, like people are just going to lowball you for Stroud. Like you need a couple of games like Burrow has had recently where he has 300 yards and 4 touchdowns.
Or an injury.
Like,
Injury. That's the other one. Yep.
So
that again, you're essentially punting by doing that. If you're like, oh, I'll wait till week 4 to then get my wide receiver 1 or whatever, like you're punting that season. Probably.
Yeah. And
in my experience, like nobody wants to trade their Puka Nakua for a quarterback. Like nobody wants to. And then like if you have a Devon Achane or a Jahmyr Gibbs and you're a contender, and it's just very difficult to trade away that guy for a quarterback.
Most teams you would have to give back, like on top of you giving them a quarterback, you would have to give them like a Darnell Mooney type, like startable, pretty good wide receiver, which is an absurd thing to think about. Like, hey, I have to give CJ Stroud plus Darnell Mooney to get Puka or something like that. Like if you said that to me last year or 4 months or a couple months ago, it's kind of crazy to think about.
Yeah, the market has shifted in an insane way.
I did trade Puka a few weeks ago for a wide receiver on the team I lost stack. Our friend Nick, Woman Lover 007 on.
Say it again. Say it again.
You said Puka for a receiver.
Oh, I'm sorry, Puka for a quarterback. I did trade Puka and Jalen Coker. I traded for Drake May, and I'm fine with it. But it doesn't feel great where Puka just goes on this awesome run right after that. But depending on team need, I think a lot of the second round is pretty interchangeable, to be honest. But I agree with you. Generally speaking, that's a hard trade to pull off. So I am going to skip Stroud here. Similar logic to me taking Bowers 1-5. I'm going to take Trey McBride here.
I like this.
And I just think he's got a lot more like wins over replacement player than someone like London or Rashee Rice or maybe even Saquon Barkley, even though that's definitely debatable with the way he's playing. So to me, I like locking up Love and Hurts and then McBride. And then to me, quarterback and tight end is always a difficult position to kind of figure out. And then the rest of the draft, I can mainly just focus on running back and receiver, I think. So I'll take McBride at the start of this tier. I do agree with Todd. There's like a tier of 5 or 6 people that are pretty equal to McBride coming up here.
And if McBride ever scores a touchdown, then wheels up, man.
Right. He had one rushing touchdown of 1 yard, I think, like a month or 2.
He had a fumble recovery.
And he also had a fumble recovery.
I have and I play in a touchdown only league. I have Kyler Murray, Trey McBride, Marvin Harrison Jr. And I thought I was like, yeah, I'm getting all of their touchdowns, like everything that James like. And then it's just been an absolute dog shit season, obviously. So
did you trade either one of them for Nick Westbrook-Akine, who's scoring a touchdown every fucking week now?
Should have. This puts me in a really funny spot for content, and I want to not pick CJ Stroud to see if Todd will pass on CJ Stroud now with Nico Collins and Bijan as the next pick. I just think that'd be really funny. But my consideration is CJ Stroud. It is Drake London, Brian Thomas. Those are the 3 people I'm thinking about right now.
Don't
that means I really fuck it. I'll take Brian Thomas Jr.
Now do what you would really do.
No, that is my gut says I want Todd's. I'm forcing Todd's hand or that person's hand. I know Todd is picking on team 9. I want to see him actually pull the trigger. Brian
So
Thomas
I'm
Jr.
gonna stick true to my board here. My board does not have CJ Stroud. So this team is gonna be somewhat similar to Team 12.
Dude, should we just not pick CJ Stroud in this four round?
This is gonna
Is
be
this
like
like the Zeke draft from last
Yeah,
year? Where
the
it's just
Zeke
like
draft.
don't draft Zeke no matter what.
Yeah,
it's
sorry,
CJ Stroud.
he didn't make the cut.
This team's in an arms race with Team 12 on being a 0 QB build, it seems like. This team has gone Nico Bijan so far. Team 12 went ARSB, Puka, Achan. This team is going to lean in on running back,
Oh boy,
I think.
I like it kind of. I like it.
And I think this team is going to go Breece Hall to pair with Bijan.
Oh, I thought you were going Saquon. All right, Breece Hall. I like it though.
I thought you were a win now. I thought you were a win now. Not projection.
Breece does have the knee injury. I think before the week before the bye, he was pretty good. He's still the running back 4 for me. Barkley is the running back 5 for me right now.
Don't do it, Matt.
That's fair. So I'm on team 8. I have Neighbors and Mahomes with my first 2 picks, and there's no doubt in my mind here. I'm gonna go CJ.
Don't.
I'm gonna go CJ Stroud, who's third overall in sleeper ADP. I'm gonna take in the middle of the 3rd round here finally. CJ Stroud, Mahomes, and Neighbors, I think, is a pretty nice start. And I know Todd's going to say they're not going to score any points, but aside from that fact, it's a pretty nice start. So Stroud, Mahomes, and Neighbors for team 8 here.
So my gamble was team 7 is going to get CJ Stroud. I didn't think Todd would take CJ Stroud, but
you didn't think my previous pick, I kept saying he was my second on the board.
I didn't think you would want to go another quarterback. That was my thought process.
I think you guys are more wary of the quarterback start than I am. I still kind of like it, but I understand that this has been a down year for that strategy.
I just don't personally, even when it was like the trendy thing, it always made me feel uncomfortable in the 5 to 8 range. I just was like, I'd rather have X quarterback and get, someone top tier receiver, running back. Like,
I think if you have patience, it's the best. Having like 2 of your first 3 picks or so is the best strategy to be awesome, like years 3 through 5, 3 through 6. But I think it makes it much more difficult years 1 and 2 to have any relevancy.
I think quarterback is less safe than we gave it credit for. I think that's part of it for me, anyways.
Yeah, like we were taking guys in round 1 and we were like, this guy will be a round 1 pick forever.
I put these 2 guys. Yeah, like if I go quarterback, double tap quarterback, like I don't have to worry about the position for the next 10 years. Like that's the thought process. Then I can take whoever.
You were taking like Herbert, Lawrence round 1 and 2, and then you haven't scored any points since.
Well, I think a consideration there, and we talked about this last year a little bit. Not even this year, but last year we talked about how this ruined some teams that we saw. I think when it was like a really trendy thing to do to get 2 elite quarterbacks, Brian, we saw a lot of teams just fuck up their future trading up into the mid-first to pick like back-to-back like Herbert and Burrow. That's where I think the big mistake was made. If I can get, CJ Stroud in the middle of the 3rd round, like, I'm going to take him.
The risk is like pretty much removed at that point, and you get the upside side of it. You get the swing.
Yeah, like this time last year, people would have traded that 305 plus 2 future firsts to move up to like 4th to take CJ Stroud. And that's
I think you made a good point. Like when trading is available in startups, people get crazy and they chased 2 things. They want to stack or they want 2 quarterbacks, and either way, they were giving up. If they were talking with a savvy manager, they were giving up an arm, a leg, and 2 eyes, and they're just walking around blind with crutches, and it's not effective. Okay.
And you talk about chasing things in a draft. I think what we're going to see this offseason is people chasing the 0 QB in the first 3 or 4 rounds. So it's going to give you you're going to see the value of getting some of these quarterbacks that we've taken. There will be drafts where a Kyler, Caleb Williams, Drake May, Justin Herbert, CJ Stroud go in the 3rd round.
Yeah, I think that's what makes, in my opinion, the topic of our podcast so interesting, that there's never going to be like a core set, like this is what you do forever. Like this is the plan, because you have to adjust if you're going to stay ahead of the curve, basically. Like, okay, maybe this is the time where I'm going to get 2 top tier quarterbacks. Like Team 8 has Patrick Mahomes and CJ Stroud, and they did not take a quarterback in the 1st round. Like that is something that's absolutely
crazy.
It's insane. That is absolutely insane. And I think that is going to become more and more prevalent, that you're seeing like 2 what you would have thought as trade up, or like that was somebody that had to pick 102 and 104 at the worst case in the this past offseason to have that team. And then they also have the 104 rookie pick, essentially, right? Like it's crazy. Okay, so Team 7, getting back on track. I have CeeDee Lamb. I have Jahmyr Gibbs. I'm between 2 players. I'm between Barkley and London. And I think I can get a really strong receiver in my next pick. And for that reason, I'm rolling with Barkley here. So I have CeeDee Lamb, Jahmyr Gibbs, Saquon Barkley. To me, that is a really strong. Like I'll stack up against Team 12 and Team 9. I think those 3 teams are really, really strong.
I was going to say, to what
it's a race for quarterback.
To the point that you were just making, the 0 QB teams do look pretty enticing right now. Like a Team 12, Amon-Ra, Puka, Achane. Team 9, Nico, Bijan, Brees, and then who you just drafted, Team 7, CeeDee, Gibbs, Saquon. That's a really nice start if you can fill out the roster with quarterbacks, which I'm sure you'll be able
And Brian just alluded to it, but it's kind of going to be an arms race for quarterback. And so whoever of those 3 teams hits on their quarterback, like this past offseason, if you were the one that hit on Bo Nix, Baker Mayfield, your team is nasty if you did this strategy. So whichever one of these teams hits on like that round 6 through 10 quarterback that can pop, then they're going to be in good shape. So this next team is the exact opposite. Team 6 has Jaden Daniels and Kyler Murray, and they're sitting there scratching their head wondering, will we ever get a positional player? I have 2 guys left in this tier. One is Drake London. The other is Rashee Rice. Give me the one that currently has 2 knees. So Drake London for Team 6. This team's probably heading into a probable 1-year punt. I'm not optimistic that these 2 quarterbacks.
I wouldn't say that.
Well, I mean, we have to think about, there's 12 teams, and there's going to be 3 or 4 of them that are going to be in a 1-year punt. We know it's not going to be the teams that have avoided quarterback. So, well, I mean, you have to assume they're going to be trying to win now.
Yeah.
So
best laid plans of mice and men and all that. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, this team is probably geared up to 1-year punt, but I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah. It's a pretty I'll say this. There's no obvious 1-year punt on the board to me right now with the way every team has drafted. I mean, I don't know. Jaden and Kyler, you're probably looking at 2 top 10 quarterbacks next year. Drake London's probably a wide receiver 1, I would think.
Through 3 rounds, every team looks good. So I guess typically you're not going to really bolster into the punt or all-in strategy until round 4 or 5.
Well, right, and like we talked about with not trading any picks, at this point, one of the teams, probably a couple, would have traded back and collected a future first and identified themselves as the 1-year punt team. We can't really do that here, so it does inherently make it a little bit more competitive. I agreed with you right there when you said there's 2 players, same tier. You took the one with knees. I'm going to take the one without knees. And I will take Rashee Rice here if I can find him.
Yeah, and if you want to think about a team that is probably 1 year punting, it's probably the team that's taking the guy coming off of a knee injury and will likely get a suspension next year. So this team, your team 5 has Caleb Williams. You got to think you're probably not banking on a QB1 season in year 2. Although I wouldn't put it past him, but I'm not sure that like that's just. I mean, he's probably 50. Like if you're doing a redraft ranking for next year, he's probably in the QB 12-ish range. I mean, I haven't done any redraft rankings, but I wouldn't supplant him in as QB 6 or anything. So if you have Rice, Caleb Williams, Bowers, I love the team. I love the value. Rice at this point is pretty freaking good value, especially if we're just playing for next year. So that team to me is probably also a 1 year punt if we're kind of basing them against the other teams. But
yeah, it could be.
I love that team with Bowers in round 1. That's just pretty sweet.
Well, and to that point that you just made, again, not to hammer home the trading thing, this is a team I would probably look to see if there's a Caleb Stan in the league and like, hey, what do you want to? You want to give me like 2 firsts and like your 4th round pick for Caleb or something crazy? We can't do that. But yeah, I agree with you. That is the most likely team of the 12 probably to pivot that way. All right, Brian, you got Jamar Chase and AJ Brown. This better not be a 1 year punt team. Team 4 here. There's a lot of guys that I think you can consider right now.
The person I'm going to take, I don't think you're probably thinking of. But I love this player. He's one of my most rostered players. I think his talent is through the roof. I think whether his situation changes next year or not, I'm going to gamble on him being a stud, and he's proven that when he's played this year. So that pick is going to be T. Higgins.
That's not who I thought you were going to take. I thought you were going to take Ken Walker.
Yeah, love that. I had 4 guys I thought about. T. Higgins is where I wanted to go. Walker is one of the other 4.
Yeah, man. The way Higgins playing this year, it's basically all the efficiency, yards per route run, targets per route run, all that stuff points to it being the best year of his career. He is entering the prime production age of wide receivers. And it does look likely that he could end up on a new team. If, we all love Drake May. If he goes to New England with Drake May, that really could be a wheels up situation where if we're doing the same exercise a year from now, he's like an early 2nd round pick because he's just fucking crushing it, So
at wide receiver 14, I think he has a chance, a very realistic chance to be top 10, possibility of top 5 with the way his talent is in a situation change or anything like that. So obviously I don't want to hope for an injury of any kind, but he's proven he can carry the load with or without Chase. He can be a top 12 receiver with Chase if he stays for whatever reason.
And as a noted T. Higgins backer for many years, hashtag trade for T back in the day, I'm definitely a fan of that one. So it's good to see that. It's good to see that I didn't have to be the one to draft him too. So team 3 has Justin Jefferson, Drake May, and I really think that at this point in the draft, we've kind of broken down. We've hit a real tier break from I would say probably like around after Rashee Rice. Maybe you could argue T. I don't really see there being a world where T gets back in like the top 7 or 8 of Dynasty wide receiver rankings. I could see that for Rashee Rice though. So I do think there's a pretty significant tier gap here.
Well,
and so now I don't really know what to do.
Once Brian drafted T, I did start to think like, okay, that kind of almost officially signals the start of entering the wide receiver glob. So you always talked about.
Yeah, and so now we're getting into a position where also the running backs are a little bit less sexy. You've got Ken Walker, Jonathan Taylor on the board. Gosh, at receiver, that you're getting into the glob here, and I'm pretty much going to be trying to avoid some of these guys in this range. I mean, Pickens, DK, Jaden Reed, somewhat appealing. do you want to take a quarterback like Purdy with his shoulder injury? Bo Nix. Bo Nix is probably my next quarterback on the board. So it's kind of ugly at this point. Gosh. Have I left any players out that you would put in this tier of player?
There's one player.
Colin Kincaid.
There's one
Colin
player I
Kincaid.
think that deserves to be up here now, and I'm hesitant to say him because I want to draft him next.
Okay. So,
but I will
fair
say,
enough.
but I'll say it because like this isn't a real league, and I don't care if I miss out on a player. I think JSN now deserves to be right in this range.
Okay, yeah, I'm not going to take him here, but that's fair. That's definitely fair. So this team, like I said, Justin Jefferson, Drake May. Given that there's very little pop guys, I don't really see anybody that's going to be. I don't want to take anybody like Taylor or Walker that I could just see kind of falling down the list. I think Bo Nix is starting to insulate himself a good bit, and he could be drafted as what is this QB 13. I could see him being a perennial top 12 guy. So we'll go Bo Nix here, and I will just admit that I do not love it, but it's starting.
He deserves to go by now. That's the best compliment I can give him.
Yeah, and if you come away with Drake May, Bo Nix, obviously, if you made that selection in round 2 or 3 or 4 months ago, you would be like, "Well, why'd you take them so early?" But at this point, I feel like I've got that team has 2 quarterbacks that can be top 12 to 14 guys, and then you have Justin Jefferson. Very similar type of thought process to team. What is that? Team 8 with Malik Neighbors. They have Patrick Mahomes and Stroud, and you think, okay, Mahomes and Stroud, like they have the names. May and Nix don't quite have that pop name that you would want. So it's from a points per game standpoint, I think they're probably going to end up being fairly similar, but they don't have the notoriety and the prowess that Mahomes and Stroud have yet.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I'm back to team 2 here. I took Lamar Jackson and Justin Herbert with my first 2 picks. The top 2 players on my board right now are Brock Purdy and Trevor Lawrence. I'm not going to take a QB3 here.
Great.
I did just mention that to Todd that I think the best wide receiver available right now is JSN. I think he's the correct pick for this team. But I'm going to do something Brian loves, and I'm going to take a player I value lower just so I can get a stack. Because that's definitely an efficient way to draft a team. And I'm going to take Ladd McConkey here, actually.
Yeah.
So I'm going to pair Ladd McConkey with Justin Herbert and Lamar Jackson. I do think there's some fair concerns about McConkey is better suited to be an elite wide receiver 2 along the lines of like Devontae Smith, Jalen Waddle, than he is suited to be a wide receiver 1. I think there's some truth to that. I wouldn't be surprised if they made a bid for T. Higgins or drafted a wide receiver in the first round next year to compete with him. But Ladd has proven he's good. He's proven he's tied to an elite quarterback. And as of now, he doesn't have any target competition. I expect him to get better. My one concern with him, and it does go back to his college days, is his durability. He does get banged up a lot. He's already been a little banged up without missing time this year.
I
think there's somewhat of a concern there, but I think it's
awesome
pretty
against zone. Against zone, he's pretty special, it seems like, and so I don't mind that pick either. But it does feels aggressive.
It feels a tad early-ish for sure. Like I said, normally. Like if we were playing like a high stakes league or something, maybe I'm going JSN or someone else. Or I mean, obviously I'm trying to trade back probably at this point, but I do use fun as a tiebreaker, and I do think stacks are fun, especially when there's an elite quarterback involved. And it's not like, oh, I stacked Minshew with Bowers, like so.
Still time, Team 5.
There is still time. I can put Bowers with Team 5 here in the 4th round.
Okay. Yeah, that he was in my top 5. So like
Okay.
I don't think it's that crazy personally. I think his arrow is pointing up, which is a thing that you definitely want to do in the timing of our draft. You want guys trending the right direction, not the wrong direction, because it can go really sour. Otherwise, so this team was the one that had the first pick. They have Josh Allen. They have Marvin Harrison Jr. I have a choice to go a couple directions. I'm also going to choose fun. I have 2 picks in a row. I'm going JSN and I'm going George Pickens, and I'm going with the receiver riders with Josh Allen, thinking I can get late running backs and my QB2 that doesn't have to match other people's QB2 to hold ground.
So between your 2 receivers, Pickens and JSN, can we just like average out their ADOT and have like a
Yes.
a mid-range
Well-
wide receiver routes?
No, well, that's been the one thing that people have been pointing out with JSN recently. I don't know if it's sustainable. It might have been with DK out a couple weeks, but JSN's ADOT has improved a lot.
It has gone. It's gone up. Yeah, for sure.
So-
I think I saw
he
that
looks-
his ADOT's higher than Jamar Chase.
He looks good, man, and they want him involved. I've been a believer, and I'm not victory lapping because it's so far from being a victory lap with him, but I've thought that they've wanted him involved and they want him to be a part of their offense and a big part, and I like that about him, and I like that about Pickens and Marvin Harrison Jr. If he comes around, I have maybe all 3 of those guys have stud receiver potential. I'm not saying that all 3 will be studs, but they have that potential. If I have that with Josh Allen, I'm very happy. I don't like the 101 typically for this kind of reason, but I think you have to take some swings instead of like safety. And I don't like typically years past, this year especially, CMC is the pick there for me, but I just don't want to. I don't know what's going on injury recovery wise. He might still be a great value here, but I'm going with the youth upside.
So that's a fun team. That team finished up with Josh Allen, Marvin Harrison Jr., George Pickens, and JSN.
Yeah.
So
And
this brings up team 2
Yeah.
with Lamar,
Fuck.
Herbert, and Ladd.
I'm going to go ahead and take Ken Walker here.
That's who team 3 was wanting. So you just sniped team 3.
That could be considered our first official snipe. But yeah, again, maybe I'm higher on these 2 guys than you guys are. But there's also been some uniquely built teams that don't need a QB3 this early. I really do think Purdy and Trevor are awesome values at this range of the draft. But I'm just not going to spend 3 top 4 picks on a quarterback. Like if we were doing this draft in real life, I just wouldn't do that. We're trying to make it as realistic as possible. So Walker was definitely 3rd on my board right now behind those 2 guys.
Yeah, and so like I said, team 3 has now Justin Jefferson, Drake May, Bo Nix, and they were wanting to take Walker right there. So that leaves the best running back on the board to me would be Taylor, and then behind him would be CMC. You know, one thing Matt and I talked about on the contender buys and looking at a lot of those old running backs is these running backs are playing a lot older than what kind of the perception is of them. So while Taylor feels like he's old, what is he 25?
25, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. So he feels like he's getting old. I think there's still a lot of tread left on the tires. So this team's going to stay as a in-betweener and still think they're going to try to compete, and they're going to roll with Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah, I like that. I like that pick here. I think you guys have more of him than I do. I only have 1 Jonathan Taylor shared right now in all my leagues.
I only have 1 out of 15.
He's kind of frustrating to own. I don't know if this is always the case or if it's just my experience having him this year. Most weeks I feel like I wish he was doing better than he is, I guess. I know they've had some inconsistencies with their offensive line play. Going from Richardson to Flacco back to Richardson is a factor. I'm with you, Todd. Long term, I'm with you. I think he's a special talent. I think he's really good. I think he's going to have several more years of really good production. I'm starting to worry that production is going to look closer to 15 points a game than 20 points a game, I guess.
Yeah, I would say probably maybe he's not as talented as the player I'm about to mention, but a year ago we would have said this guy wasn't that talented, or people would say that. And similar type of trajectory of a career is Saquon Barkley. You know, his last couple of years with the Giants, people were like, "Oh, he actually kind of sucks." If you look at his advanced numbers, Saquon Barkley isn't good. Well, now he is back in the third round, even at the age of 27. So
that's a good point.
Yeah. Probably in not a great environment right now. He's also battled some injuries. If he can have a season where he doesn't get a high ankle sprain and they have a better supporting cast, I think you could look at him as maybe not the value of some of these other running backs that we've taken, but the output to be similar to them.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. All right, so we're back on Brian with Team 4 here, who went all wide receiver, Chase, A.J. Brown, Higgins with his first 3 picks.
So another inflection point for this team. But to me, we talked about the non-QB drafters. Like, it's kind of a race to get whoever you view those couple maybe best case scenario receivers for this type of build. This team has the luxury to do so. And I kind of had a hunch when I took Higgins that I would be able to do that just based on the first 3 teams drafting the way they had. So I'm going to go Brock Purdy here, and I'm going to have Brock Purdy, Jamar Chase, AJ Brown, T Higgins. I really like that core in terms of winning.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, because I don't know when this guy is going to go or if he's going to get drafted in the next 8 picks. Was there any thought at all to Anthony Richardson there?
No.
I have him and Purdy in like the same tier together. So
because Brian, the only reason I ask is when you first started talking about that, I thought you were going to kind of pivot to being like, I'm just going to take that home run swing with Chase, AJ Brown, and Higgins, and take Anthony Richardson and see if he's going to get back to that value of like mid to late first round.
I'll say he wasn't in consideration, but he's in like my top 4 or 5 picks. All right. So
he's
not way off the map. I just like as soon as the way it played out, I'm similar to you. I'd rather Purdy and Trevor Lawrence. So it's like at no point was I taking Richardson there. That being said, like Team 7, where they don't have a quarterback, I could see him being in play for sure.
I'm considering. I was considering him with this next pick. So I'm on the clock right now with Team 5. Bowers, Caleb, Bryce. We kind of talked about this could be the 1-year punt team out of the 12. And
it's a fun pick if you pulled the trigger here.
I'm not going to go Richardson.
But
it's going to be a similar to gamble to Richardson with just a lot more value insulation, I believe. I'm going to take JJ McCarthy here.
Oh, wow.
To pair with Caleb, Rice, and Bowers. And really, this is more so drafting Kevin O'Connell, Justin Jefferson in the Minnesota offense, more so than JJ McCarthy, the player, at 405. But I do think that I follow all the beat reporters for all 32 teams. I have paid special attention to what the Vikings beat reporters are saying about Sam Darnold, JJ McCarthy. To a person, everybody is insistent that JJ McCarthy is going to get the shot next year. There's nothing, including winning the Super Bowl, which I kind of doubt in my mind, and I don't think that's going to happen. But they're saying there's nothing that Sam Darnold can really do to earn a large contract from this team. They're gonna roll with McCarthy, the rookie wage scale, all that, build around him. It was always going to be like a bridge insurance plan for Darnold this year.
But same time, like if we were drafting this all the way through beyond round 4, which we aren't right at the moment, but you have that hedge bet of Darnold that worst case scenario, I think he starts somewhere next year. So like all of a sudden you have 3 starting quarterbacks instead of 2.
Yeah, and I could take him like round 6 or wherever he would go.
But if he does keep that starting job, you've protected your JJ McCarthy pick at the same time. Like obviously you don't want to draft a backup quarterback in round 4, but like it is an interesting and not the worst hedge that you can pair those two together. Worst case scenario, you have 2 starting quarterbacks. Best case scenario, you have 3.
Yeah, I mean, outside of Bowers, who's just a fucking rock solid player, and I think Caleb is getting to that point too. This is almost starting to lean towards like the high volatility variance type build right now, where this shit could just go wrong. And it's like me and Todd talked about in the last episode, where it's with the Cronin League, like, we did some 1-year punts that turned out pretty poorly. Like this could be that if Rice has some complications, McCarthy doesn't really end up earning the starting job, gets Trey Lance a little bit. I could see that, but it's hard to pass up the opportunity to just get the starting quarterback for that Minnesota offense. Like even Addison's starting to look a lot better lately. Hawkinson just got back from injury. They're just such a good offense that I want whoever is the starting quarterback for that team, and I'm pretty convinced it's going to be JJ McCarthy after this year.
So team 6 on the board has Jaden Daniels, Kyler Murray, and Drake London. And this kind of is just showing me why I do not want to take a quarterback in round 1, because there's some quarterbacks on the board right now that I'm very interested in. Like I'm interested in Anthony Richardson. I'm interested in Trevor Lawrence. Dak's on the board. And I really don't feel comfortable taking any of them. I would have been comfortable taking a third quarterback right here and going into a 1-year punt maybe a couple years ago or 3 or 4 years ago when it was easier to trade that quarterback. Like I could draft Anthony Richardson here and let him recoup some value and then boom, turn around and trade him for like AJ Brown and get a nice value boost. Like that's not happening anymore. Like
I still think you can do a similar move here without doing a 1-year punt. I do think, because you got to remember there's still 5-6 games left to play this year. I don't know, man. Like if you take Anthony Richardson here and he just goes on a heater, like he's played well the last couple games. If he goes on a heater here these next 5 games, I think you could definitely trade him for like an AJ Brown or Marvin Harrison after the season, potentially. But
yeah, and maybe you don't have to shoot that high. I guess you could just shoot for a
like a London
Pickens or JSN. Pickens or JSN. Team 1 only has Josh Allen. But I think the thing you run into is that the team 1, Brian's team, is going to eventually they're going to draft a quarterback in round 6 or 7, and then they're going to be like, well, I don't need a quarterback because I've got Geno and I also have Stafford. Like, why do I need another quarterback? And so like you just kind of run into that across the board in the offseason. Now, early in the year, next year, yes, I could probably make that trade, but it's like you just said earlier, you get to week 4 and like, all right, well now I'm 1-3 and I'm kind of already behind the 8 ball. So I could probably draft someone or draft Anthony Richardson here and then turn around and trade them for one of these receivers at some point. But I'm going to have to play the waiting game. And I don't know if I've got the stomach for that. But anyways,
or
this team is
hold on. Or, alternatively, you could, if you start believing in Richardson yourself, you could look at Jaden Daniels and see if you can flip him for CeeDee Lamb or Neighbors or something like that.
That's the move that you would hope to be able to make. But when I have tried to go to those types of teams, they're all tough, like, no, thank you. I have no interest in that. And yeah, like, so I think you're going from Jaden Daniels and you're like maybe going down to Puka and hoping they're willing to do that.
Yeah,
and
that's
you
fair.
may not even get a bite there. So I think that just reinforces to me that I just don't want to take that round 1 quarterback. I'm good with the round 2 quarterback. I'm even okay with going round 2 and 3, like what you did with team 8, where you took Neighbors and you went Mahomes Stroud. Like that one feels more serviceable to me than having like London as the wide receiver 1. So this team is going to go ahead.
So Todd, as team 6, if you had taken CeeDee Lamb instead of Jaden Daniels, who are you taking in this situation?
If team 6 had CeeDee Lamb, I'm probably going Anthony Richardson here.
Yeah.
So if this team had CeeDee Lamb, Kyler Murray, Drake London, I'm probably going Anthony Richardson right here.
And do you like your team through 4 picks more now? Like whoever
the guy
this
that I'm probably
going to
take,
make.
Yeah, the guy that I'm probably going to take, and I said that this team could be a 1-year punt. I'm going to take Christian McCaffrey here, with the thought being that we're going to run out weeks 1 through 4. And if Jaden Daniels and Kyler Murray are playing like top 8 quarterbacks, Drake London's playing as a wide receiver 1, CMC is doing CMC things, and he's doing like what round 3 Saquon Barkley's doing, then this team is good. Like this team can roll. Now, if Jaden Daniels takes a step back like Stroud did, if Kyler Murray is still kind of, up and down, then this team is probably trying to move CMC early in the year for more than a first. I think one thing that Brian, you mentioned it at one point this offseason, and you said something to the effect of, in a startup, like I'll draft him and I'll just look to trade him. And that like never really hits my mind in a startup. Like I'm always drafting guys like thinking like I want to hold them, but in reality, we are constantly looking to trade. So like sometimes you need to have guys that you can, like everybody, basically any contender. So 6 or 7 teams want CMC.
Yeah.
Now, not everybody can afford him. Not everybody is going to be willing to pay up. So maybe you're down to like a couple teams, but there's a lot of guys that we're going to be drafting here. Like not every player, not everybody wants Brock Purdy and JJ McCarthy, like who just went 2 picks before.
So the risk you run is obvious, right? That if CMC looks washed or is injured, now you're a tanking team and you have Christian McCaffrey as your 4th round pick, right? So like that's the risk. But I think his reward also can definitely, like, I would be more comfortable taking Christian McCaffrey than someone else that doesn't have the proven upside that he does in this spot with that same thought process.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm always going to defend CMC until we know the end is here. But I was thinking of taking him a couple picks back on not the Bowers team, but I was thinking of taking him over Ken Walker, to be honest. But a startup draft, especially a startup draft with 5-6 games left to play this year where injuries could happen, plus whatever playoffs or whatever. It's definitely a risk, but I think it's more likely than not that CMC returns to form and he's averaging over 20 points a game next year. So I definitely think it's a great pick at this point in the draft.
Yeah, I think that there's a very, very good chance that within the next 12 months, CMC and Barkley are worth the same at some point. If not CMC being worth more.
Yep, completely agree.
And speaking of Barkley, Team 7 has Lamb, Gibbs, and Saquon Barkley.
I'm torn between 2 quarterbacks here, and I'm going to have fun and take a swing. I will take Anthony Richardson here.
Nice. Yep. That is a fun swing. If Richardson hits, that team's going to be nasty next year.
You know what's fun about that pick for this team is that this team is a very viable team to have a 3rd quarterback, and like a team, like a quarterback, like a 3rd being maybe Rodgers is like a 1-year. Like obviously it's super gross, but you're going to probably be able to get him in like maybe even like the early teens, maybe like around 11 or 12. That's a very viable team to have Rodgers and just be like, all right, if Richardson struggles a little bit, then yeah, it's going to suck to play Rodgers on this awesome team, but I can play him.
I was thinking like a less gross, like Geno was the person that I always jump to that people devalue.
Yeah, you just got to pay more for him is kind of my thought.
Yeah, sure.
Agreed. Yeah, I mean, I think Geno's the type though where this team could be Geno could be the QB2 for this type team.
Yeah, right.
So I'm up here with Team 8. I took Neighbors, Mahomes, and Stroud the first 3 rounds. The last round or so, we've been kind of talking about why we don't want to take a QB3 this early. There are a few different guys I'm looking at, but I really do think that the best value on the board and a great buy low right now, if you can get him at this type of price, I'm going to go ahead and take Trevor Lawrence. I just think that he's good. I think his best days are ahead of him. I like that they got Brian Thomas to pair with him. I'm certain that he's going to get a coaching change this offseason. And, you don't necessarily need to hope that he gets Ben Johnson or the new offensive wonder kind. It could just be like fucking Mike Vrabel or something. But I just think a coaching change is going to benefit the team overall, similar to how Harbaugh came into the Chargers. He wasn't necessarily known as an offensive guy. Pick Greg Roman. People actually thought that would hurt Herbert, myself included. And Todd even argued this after the Harbaugh hiring happened. He's like, man, any decline in volume, you're going to make up for in efficiency with just a good team around him. And I do think we're going to see a similar thing to Trevor next year, hopefully, where the team overall is just better and they're going to get like a top 5, top 10 pick to add to that team. And the bottom line is I just think Trevor's good. I don't really understand people that think he sucks. And to me, I can just take a good young quarterback here at 4-8. I'll do that and figure out the rest later. Like maybe I trade Mahomes or Stroud over the offseason or, otherwise figure it out. But
Mahomes would be a really good one where you could probably trade him for where he's got the name value. You could have a better chance of maybe trading him for like a Bijan or a Garrett Wilson.
Yeah, definitely. Or Gibbs or any of those guys. Yeah.
And just to kind of reiterate on Trevor Lawrence, he went out. His last game was week 9, and obviously I'm just kind of splitting up and pulling out his good stuff, but let's just have some fun. So weeks 4 through 9, he was QB9 in weeks 4 through 9. So small sample. I'm obviously splitting out a bad game that he had in week 3, but in weeks 4 through 9, like he was starting to play better. And I feel like that all we heard about is how terrible he is, and he's not been that bad. So yeah, I think that's a pretty good pick there.
I think
it's a graph of production and expectations. That's the Trevor Lawrence hate for sure.
Yeah, right. Bottom line is I think he has a good floor. So maybe I have like the QB 18 for the next couple of years, and that's not great. But he's not going to fall below that. Like there's no scenario that I can see outside of almost multiple catastrophic injuries where he's just not a starter in 5 years. You're just locking up like your QB2 spot for the next decade.
So Matt, let's say you could choose which one of these guys has the pop where you can trade them. Which is the person? Is it Mahomes that you would want to trade off of a pop, or is that Mahomes kind of, if he has a pop, it confirms I want to keep him and trade one of the other guys? Like what is the threshold and what are you hoping for in this situation? Best case scenario, you control what happens.
I think it's Mahomes because I think Mahomes is closer to being the most properly valued quarterback out of the 3. I think we are getting to a point where Stroud might be getting a little undervalued because I do expect him to again throw for a lot of yards, touchdowns, etc. in the future. Even though as the season has gone on this year, I'm starting to see more of a range of outcome where he's not as good as I and other people thought this past offseason. But Trevor is like dead last in that category. Like Trevor is not a guy I want to trade this offseason. I want to wait until he becomes the player I think he is and the production matches, and then I'll consider trading him. I don't think to me, he's just a major buy right now, not a sell. I did end up selling a share because he got hurt, and I almost I real quick. So Brian, you're in this league, the Sitcom League. I traded after Trevor's injury. I traded Trevor and Jahmyr Gibbs for Justin Herbert and CMC on a contending team, and I didn't love doing that. But my thought process with if I'm gonna kind of panic sell Trevor / like necessary trade Trevor because of injury, I'd rather tier up at quarterback. I'd rather not tier down to like a Jared Goff or Baker, or I mean Baker's been balling. Maybe he goes here soon, but like I didn't want to trade into that like mid-ish QB range. I wanted to get a QB that I'm confident is going to be really good for a long time. So I'd rather like pay the extra fee to make Trevor into Herbert. But in general, I think Trevor's just a major buy right now. I think his best days are ahead of him. I think he's like a surefire bet to gain value from where he's at right now today. All right, so we got
Team 9.
Todd with Team 9, Nico Collins, Bijan, and Breece Hall, the first 3 picks. So you got another 0 QB team here.
Yeah, this would have been a spot where T-Law would have made some sense. Running back kind of bled out, but this team does have Bijan and Breece already. This team probably is ready for another receiver, and we're just going to keep ignoring quarterback here. So Dak could be a consideration if quarterback was being looked at. He's my top quarterback on the board, and by actually quite a large margin. But this team's going to go receiver again, and we're going to go DK Metcalf. I've kind of been lower on DK, I feel like, over the last couple of years. He was in that glob pretty firmly. I think he's still kind of in the glob, but he's near the top of the glob now instead of the middle of the pack.
Yeah.
I did make a trade for DK over the weekend. I traded away, and I don't really love it, to be honest with you, but kind of team with a lot of injuries, needing to win. I traded away my 26 first and Godwin for DK. I think I got a third also, but
yeah,
26 first and Godwin for DK.
Yeah, I mean DK is just rock solid, right? Like you're at this point, you're not expecting him to turn into like an 18 point per game plus wide receiver, but he's got among the highest floors, especially with age included in terms of value plus production floor. He's basically the highest pick right now, I would say. There's just not a lot to be concerned about outside of the freak injury.
Very Pickens like.
Yeah.
I don't see the peak that T has because he doesn't have Burrow, but Geno's not bad. And yeah, I mean, I think DK is solid. He's nothing special. I think that's probably on the higher end of what I would pay for DK is Godwin. I value Godwin probably more than most, though. I probably value Godwin at like 2 2s. So that's basically like a first and 2 2s is the way I was looking at it.
Most people aren't paying 2 2s for Godwin.
No, they're not. And I typically wouldn't trade him, and I haven't traded him. But that's I didn't have any seconds on this team, so otherwise I would have used a second. When I say 2 2s, I kind of mean like a couple playoff 2s. So like call it an early 2.
Yeah, that's fair.
So Godwin to me is like an early 2.
All right, Brian, Team 10, you got Joe Burrow, Garrett Wilson, and Brian Thomas with your first 3 picks here. Leaves you a lot of options, I think, at this point of the draft.
I'm looking at 3 guys, 2 that haven't really been mentioned and 1 that Todd just talked about. It can definitely go in 2 different directions. I'm going to choose the quarterback direction and take Dak. So I'll have Dak, Burrow, Wilson, Brian Thomas. The thought being, if I were drafting this spot, Team 12 is going to at least take 1 quarterback. They have
that's what Team 12 is not sure about, because Team 12 has ARSB, Puka, and Achane, and they were either going to go 0 QB, continue the run, or if Dak was there, Dak was being taken. With Dak now gone, they've got to kind of reassess. Dak's gone, Trevor Lawrence is gone, JJ McCarthy is gone. So now you're getting down to like Goff, Baker, Tua. and they've got a decision to make after Team 11 goes. But
So my thought process with taking Dak was Dak would be the front of the line. Without hearing what Todd said, obviously that's a spoiler, but I would have thought that if it was just Joe Schmo that I don't know, they're taking at least one quarterback there, maybe two. And with that thought process, I know Team 11's not, or in my head, Team 11's not going to take a quarterback. I take a quarterback, and I'm probably going to get. I have 2 to 3 receivers that I'm looking at that I can get one of those 3 in the back in the 5th round. So I want to lock in Dak, and then maybe I get my favorite of the 3. I don't know. I think they're all kind of like bunched together for me.
Those receivers that you could get in the 5th round, and maybe one of them goes here at Team 11, you're looking at like Flowers, Olave, Odunze, Devontae Smith, maybe Josh Downs, Tyreek. That's kind of the receivers that would be next up.
All right, so Team 11 here, I got Jordan Love, Jalen Hurts, Trey McBride, and I'm in a tough spot here because the 2 highest guys on my board I'm not considering here, which is Tua and Baker. I just don't think they necessarily have the value plus production upside of if I'm going to take a 3rd quarterback. I think Trevor kind of has that more than them with the team I drafted previously. So while I think they in a vacuum are the best picks right now, I'm going to skip over them. And it's between 3 guys for me right now. It's between Devontae Smith, Josh Downs, and Sam Laporta. And I'm going to skip on Laporta because I have McBride, and I'm just really not sure what to make of his sophomore year. I think he's a good player. That's going to be fine. But narrows it down to Devontae Smith and Josh Downs. And I'm going to take Devontae Smith here, and I don't love it. But I do think Josh Downs kind of has more upside than Devontae Smith. Just a large factor of that is he doesn't play next to A.J. Brown. But I think I think Downs is going to go undrafted now because I don't think Todd's like the biggest fan of him, or certainly not as much as I am. But I just think Devontae Smith has like the best combination of, value, security, floor, with some ceiling spike games at least. But as long as he plays with Jalen Hurts and next to A.J. Brown, both of those that combination is going to cap his upside, I think. But phenomenal real life player.
Matt, the thought process I assume would be your 5th round pick. You're probably coming back with another receiver of that grouping, probably.
If Todd didn't take Josh Downs, I would take Downs with my next pick. And if he did take Downs, I would be, I don't know, looking at like Laporta, or maybe I do go Tua or Baker there, even though I don't love it. But I do think Tua and Baker are strong values here. And Todd has a 0 QB team with Team 12 with Amon-Ra, Puka, and Achane here.
Yeah, so this team is going to keep the 0 QB rolling. There's only one other 0 QB team going here. By the time we get back to this team, first off, we've got there's only 3 teams that need a second quarterback. So I think we could see a little bit of a lull at quarterback, but that probably means that Goff, Baker, and Tua are all gone. So by passing on them, you're starting to get down into the Derek Carr, Matt Stafford range as your QB1. So maybe that's a risk. Maybe after this team clicks what they pick at pick 4, maybe they reconsider picking a quarterback at pick 5. But at pick 4, we're going to go Chris Olave.
Okay.
So this league, we're not playing out this season, so him being out for the rest of the year is not a problem. And I think that Olave rebounds his value a good bit, and I think that he can get back up into being I don't think one of the elite guys like London or Brian Thomas Jr. or She Rice, but I think he can rebound back into like the late third, which was T, Ladd, Pickens, JSN. And so Chris Olave to pair with ARSB, Puka, and Achan. And then this team would have a decision to make with the next pick. The next pick would be then between getting a tight end to kind of fill out that stud lineup, and probably that tight end would be actually Hawkinson and not Laporta. So what this team would probably do is hope to trade back and get the tight end that falls, or they have to consider taking Baker here. One thing I think this team could do is trade their first to get a pick here in this round to get a quarterback. So maybe they trade their first and go get Goff, trade their first and go get Baker, something like that.
So real quick, Brian, I'm going to ask you this since Todd just made the Olave pick. Olave is an interesting dynasty case for me. So if I told you a year from now, one of two scenarios would happen. Olave goes back to earning targets at a high rate. He's productive. The offense with Derek Carr is serviceable, pretty good, whatever. And Olave's back to scoring 16, 17 plus points per game next year. And he's like a late second, early third startup pick. Or he has another concussion. Rashid Shaheed comes back. He makes life hell for Olave. The Saints are just miserable again. And Olave kind of struggles. He's up and down, and he drops to like the late fifth startup pick. Which scenario do you think is more likely if one of those two happens? It's tough, right?
Yeah, it is. It's tough because I would have taken him here too, but okay. I think your point is interesting. I think he probably, if you're just playing simple odds, I think the odds are probably more in favor of him declining versus usurping a lot of the guys that we've previously drafted.
Yeah.
But he has for sure top 12 upside. So it's like that's another like check on the pick side versus dropping side, because I think he not only has the upside to be a third round pick, or I think that's what you said, buddy. I think he has the upside to be a second round pick, probably.
Yeah, late second, early third is what I was thinking. Like he has upside to be.
Yeah, so he is very similar case to me as what T had last year, where there's just a lot of injuries, a lot of games where like he's left early. And obviously it's concussions versus like soft tissue things, but like Olave's points per game stats look so miserable because I think he left like 2 or 3 games early. It's just been really rocky road. Now he doesn't have Burrow like T has, but he also doesn't have Jamar Chase to compete with like T does. And so I think there's just a very similar situation where people are just kind of like, you know what, I'm tired of this guy. Like, give me another glob wide receiver and you can have my Chris Olave. And so I think that we could get into a situation like that in the offseason and he can be fairly gettable.
Like,
so I don't know.
I know Olave was like a expected fantasy points darling, right? So like that's kind of like what.
Oh yeah, our friend David loves him. I'm sure.
Yeah, he's huge on Olave, and I get it. I just don't see the same like. I think he has that route to get there. I just like to use T. Higgins. I think T. Higgins like just looks like a better receiver to me, and that's why he's always been my preference. But I get why someone like David or Todd might prefer the other. That
and I don't want to say that
Todd got him for a round and a half later than him, right? Or a round plus later. So
yeah, I don't want to say that you were the one saying this about T or ranking him this way, but like we got to remember that T was ranked as like outside of the top 30 there for a while in Dynasty wide receiver rankings. So like the bottom fell out of T because of these injuries, and it's similar for Olave. Now concussions are scarier, but like I'm not a brain surgeon. Like I don't know what's going on there. So like, I'm just going to assume that we haven't seen guys leave the NFL because of the concussions recently. And so like, I hope that all is well, but like Brandon Cooks had a lot of them, and then he came back. So like I'm just gonna assume that he comes back until he doesn't. And so
I think, yeah, I
and
think
so
you have
like
to believe. You have to believe in the talent, right?
yeah.
And if you believe in the talent, you can take on the risk potentially. If you don't believe in his talent and you're taking on that other additional risk of like that thing that we're not sure about and nobody probably is sure about, if they're being honest, that's when it starts getting a little uncomfortable.
So the one thing that concerned me as much as the concussions, and I know Rashid Shaheed is not really a household name, and I know he fucked up his knee and he's out for the year, should be back early next year. I think, I could be wrong about that, but I think he's supposed to be back early next year. When they were both healthy, Rashid Shaheed was earning as many targets as Chris Olave, more or less. I don't have the exact target share percentage, but it was about that. There were like multiple games where they were both healthy and Shaheed had more targets. It's kind of concerning to me because, like you said, that's not Jamar Chase. That is fucking Rashid Shaheed, who's battling Olave for 10 targets a game. I don't know, man. Like that combined with the concussions, combined with him being stuck with Derek Carr, the Saints being fucked cap position wise, not able to maneuver to improve their team a whole lot. I just have a lot of concerns with Chris Olave, but I understand that his peripheral numbers were as good or better than Garrett Wilson's at the start of his career, and Wilson went 203 here, and we all said that that's a fair pick. That's where Garrett belongs. So I get it. I get the upside case, but I'm also concerned that that's kind of the only reason I wanted to ask your thoughts on it too, Brian, because I just wasn't really. Olave is one of those kind of guys where I'm just kind of holding for now, but I really don't know if he's a buy or sell in Dynasty, especially going into this offseason where he's expected to be fine next year, all that stuff. But
yeah, I don't have it in front of me, but I'd be curious the targets per route run rate, Olave versus Shaheed. I would imagine overall target share it might be tighter because Olave left at least 2 games early. So I think that there could be, if you start looking at like the actual targets per route run, it may not be as close. But I mean, Shaheed was very good this year.
Yeah, he was.
He did, to me, there was some element of the QJ, like just it seemed like there were times where he was just wide open downfield and Carr just threw it up and he caught it and he ran in for a touchdown. I'm not saying that he's as bad as QJ, but I do think that there is some element of he ran downfield and there were I remember a couple times where Carr just threw it and there was not even a defender near him. Maybe that's because he's awesome. I don't know. And if he's that awesome, then maybe we need to all go be trading for him.
Well, I thought Shaheed was kind of like, I'm going to ignore that this player is producing a lot because I don't think he's anything. And Brian was kind of on it early before I think a lot of people were on our podcast early this year. He was saying, like, it's not just the deep shots, man. They're scheming touches up for this guy. Like he's an integral part of their offense. And to me, one of the selling points for Olave before this year was he didn't have another integral piece, unless you want to say Kamara, to compete with for targets. And when you think of Kamara as a receiving running back, and then you add Shaheed, and then you add Derek Carr's limitations, there's a lot of concern. But again, this is the type of range in the draft where you want to take swings, right? We're going to take upside swings. I think it's a good pick here, very justifiable pick, but just wanted to kind of talk through the risk reward of it real quick.
All right, so that's through 4 rounds. If you on our Twitter feed, we will post the screenshot of this. If you made it to this point, we probably should have said earlier, but this podcast you could have watched on YouTube. So if you want to see a screenshot of what it looks like, you can also go there. So the Twitter is at market_watch1. You can also find us on Twitter. You can find Matt at Dynasty Peasant, Brian at Brian_O'Leary1, and I'm Todd at Dynasty.
Also, real quick, sorry, let us know if you want us to do like a rounds 5 through 8, right? If you want to see how the rest of this plays out, give us a shout. Let us know that.
Yeah, give us some feedback. We'll be happy to continue it.
Thanks for joining.
Imaginary players, they make